I'm Richard Crest in a very cold Brussels. Whatever you're up to in the hours ahead, I hope it's profitable. I'll see you tomorrow.
Putin's troops may be losing one battle, but are they winning the war? The lead starts right now. NATO and the Biden administration point to small victories for Ukraine amidst blunders by Russia, but Putin continues to pulverize South and East Ukraine. So are we headed to some sort of stalemate, ending up with two different countries, an occupied Ukraine and a free Ukraine? Plus, Biden goes big, announcing plans to release a record 1 million barrels of oil a day from the U.S. Reserve. But might that be just a drop in the bucket for the average consumer? And a key member of Trump's inner circle front and center, Jared Kushner, taking questions from the January 6th committee today. What we're learning about his testimony, that's ahead.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and we start today with breaking news in our world lead. New signs that Russia is in this for the long haul as Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine enters its sixth week. Today, the Russian leader authorized the military to draft approximately 135,000 additional Russian citizens. And NATO Secretary General says, quote, "We can expect additional offensive actions, bringing even more suffering," unquote, for the Ukrainian people. On the ground, a clear shift by the Russian military, now redirecting forces to the east, to the Donbass region, where Ukrainian officials are reporting heavy shelling. There was also an intense bombardment in the eastern Kharkiv region, which a Ukrainian military official says has prevented the opening of evacuation corridors there for citizens to escape with their lives. And despite Kremlin claims of de-escalation, Russian forces are continuing to strike the capital city of Kyiv, according to a senior Pentagon official today. Just moments ago, Ukraine's defense minister announced in a tweet that at least 148 children, 148, have been killed in Ukraine by Putin's army since the start of the invasion 5 weeks ago. Still, the West has doubts about Russia's ability to achieve its ultimate success. New intelligence from the UK says that morale among Russian soldiers is so low, some troops are apparently refusing to carry out orders. President Biden earlier today said Putin is becoming increasingly isolated, but Biden says he is skeptical Putin will withdraw all of his forces from around Kyiv. Let's go straight to CNN's chief international anchor, Christiane Amanpour, who's live for us in Kyiv. And Christiane, even though Russia's efforts to take over Kyiv in a short period of time, that failed, parts of the capital where you are, as you tell us, are still totally destroyed. And you visited a farming village about a mile from the front line. Tell us what you saw.
Well, Jake, I did. And the thing also is that we had some incoming missiles into this city, into the heart of this city this afternoon. So, you know, while, yes, the Pentagon and others believe that troops are withdrawing from this region to Belarus to refit, resupply, and then be redeployed somewhere, we were also told to expect continued air power and potential missiles. And that is certainly what we saw in the heart of this city. Earlier today, I went to the outskirts of Kyiv, where it's pretty much a farming village, and the Ukrainians very early in the war showed us how they had stopped a major armored column of the Russians from coming from there right here to the center. The first thing you notice approaching the front northeast of Kyiv are the lines of villagers waiting for humanitarian handouts. They receive a bag of bread and basics to get them through these difficult days. The first week of the war, a shell hit us near the greenhouse. We barely survived, says this woman. We had help from strangers around us. They gave us bread and canned food. We wouldn't have managed otherwise. No one here knows when this war will end or whether Russia still has designs on Kyiv. The front line is about a mile away. For now, an uneasy calm prevails ever since the Ukrainian defenders stopped the Russian advance here. It was February 28th, they say, day 4 of the war. They want to show us how they did it, but first we have to clamber over the bridge they downed to see the armored column they managed to take out. The riverbank is littered with their skeletons, and this was a turkey shoot. Russian armored vehicles and tanks had come off the road to avoid the anti-tank mines, only to find themselves unable to cross the bridge and unable to reverse in time. Ukrainian forces tell us none of the soldiers inside survived. A little further up the road, 2 tanks have been virtually smelted, blasted almost to smithereens. 40-year-old Yevgeny, a veteran fighter, proudly tells us this was his handiwork. We all here have one role: to keep the enemy off our land, he says. First thing they did after seeing the village, they started to shell houses, just like that. They didn't see us. They didn't know we were here, so they just started to work on houses. And so I took the tank in my sights and I fired a rocket, and goodbye to him. The destroyed vehicles are stamped with an O. The Ukrainian officers here tell us this identifies them as Russian units that entered from Belarus to the north. Oleg is the officer who commanded this operation. As for now, looking at previous fighting we've had, I can tell you that we are trained better, he tells me. We have stronger morale and spirit because we're at home. They are afraid, but they go because they're made to. He's been battle-hardened ever since the first Russian invasion in 2014. He says his side has enough weapons, ammunition, and determination to win. I can tell you I'm almost sure the Russians are regrouping and not retreating, he says. Besides, we are preparing ourselves to go forward. We're not preparing just to defend here. US and British intelligence say Putin seems to have, quote, massively misjudged this situation and clearly overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory. And this old lady tells us, I have seen one war and here we go again. I wish Putin would go away. The people of this land remain stalwart and the soldiers remain dug in, hoping they can continue to withstand whatever Putin has in store for them next. And so, of course, who knows what Putin has in store? Everybody's trying to guess his next move. As you mentioned, could it be a division of the country? Could it be a stalemate, a continued war of attrition? One of the very, very concerning things, the Polish Prime Minister told me that even despite all these sanctions, which eventually will bite, the ruble in Russia is doing pretty well, and they're concerned that Putin's not yet feeling enough pain in order to stop this.
All right, so CNN's Christiane Amanpour in Kyiv, Ukraine. Thank you so much. Appreciate that report. As the war in Ukraine continues to rage on, President Biden is now invoking wartime powers to help Americans paying for near-record gas prices here in the U.S. CNN's MJ Lee is live for us at the White House. And MJ, today Biden said 1 million barrels of oil will be released from U.S. reserves every day for the next 6 months. Explain what the intention is of that.
Yeah, Jake, you do the math there, 1 million barrels of oil a day for about 6 months. That amounts to some 180 million barrels of oil that the U.S. is planning to release. Not the first time that the U.S. has taken this kind of action. Remember, earlier this month, U.S. and its allies announcing the release of some 60 million barrels of oil. Last November, 50 million barrels of oil. And the hope right now is that those kinds of actions, in addition to taking measures to try to boost oil production here in the United States, can try to eventually drive prices down. But interestingly and not surprisingly, U.S. administration officials are being very wary when they're asked questions about how quickly this might help drive prices down. There's a real recognition that it is very, very challenging to get prices down. The former releases of the oil that I mentioned, those did not really have an impact on getting the oil prices down, as consumers are really feeling it at the gas pump. Jake.
And MJ, you also asked President Biden about whether Putin is being misinformed by his advisors, as a U.S. official told CNN yesterday. What did he have to say to that?
I did. I just asked the president how badly he believes Vladimir Putin is being misinformed by his advisors. And this was the first time that the president addressed this issue ever since yesterday, when U.S. officials declassified information showing that Vladimir Putin is getting bad information about how badly his army is doing, his military is doing, and how badly the sanctions are affecting his economy. This is what the president told me.
That's an open question. There's a lot of speculation, but he seems to be, I'm not saying this with a certainty, he seems to be self-isolating, and there's some indication that he has fired or put under house arrest some of his advisors.
So the clear suggestion there being that some of Putin's advisors may be being punished. And one more question that the president took from a reporter was about Russia's claims that they're going to be pulling forces out of Kyiv. He said there's no clear evidence that he is pulling all forces out of Kyiv. He also said that there's evidence to suggest that he is beefing up military presence in the Donbas region. So everybody from the president on down showing real skepticism about some of these new Russian claims. Jake.
Yeah, MJ Lee at the White House, thanks so much. Here to discuss Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. He's the ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee. He also serves on the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, good to see you as always. President Biden is calling on Congress to impose fees on oil companies if they do not use these leases on federal lands that they have and increase domestic oil production in the U.S. We all want domestic oil production increased to solve this problem, or so I hear from Capitol Hill. Do you support this measure?
Well, I think, the president, first of all, he's not made a proposal that's here for us to look at. But I can tell you this, is that the president at least is going in the right direction of not just looking to release oil from our strategic reserves, which is there for emergencies. He's looking to raise the production domestically. That's where we need to look. We need to make certain that we have energy, obviously produced here that can give us the independence that can also lower the price.
Let's talk about his plan to release oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserves. Do you think this will help gas prices, at least in the near term?
Well, nothing will, releasing oil now won't reduce it in the near term, obviously, because it has to be produced into gasoline and make it onto the market. And it's going to be released at a time as to what the price of oil is at that time. I think that this is a very dangerous precedent to say that the president's going to just start releasing from the Strategic Oil Reserve at every time that he's concerned about how his energy prices, his energy policies are affecting prices. I think what he needs to do is to change his policies. And his policies need to be focusing on domestic energy production, and he does appear as if he's going in that direction ultimately.
So let me just circle back on the question about domestic oil production, because it's one of the things I hear from Republican members of Congress all the time, the need to increase domestic oil production. One of the things the White House says is there are so many opportunities for petroleum companies to do it with these leases they have on federal land, and they're not using it. What's the way to get them to use it? If not, I recognize, I hear you when you say he hasn't actually proposed the actual fee, the actual legislation. But as a theoretical matter, do you think these oil companies should be fined if they don't use these leases?
No, Jake, from the very beginning, this president said, and even on the campaign trail said, that he's basically going to go at war with the energy companies, the oil production that's here with his Green New Deal-esque proposals. That, of course, chills the market. And if you're not continuing to provide leases and land that's available for energy production, obviously the land that is there for energy production isn't going to be put into production as quickly as possible because you don't have this availability of future production. He needs to change his policies. He needs to say that we're for energy production. It goes toward our fueling our economy, and obviously it lowers price, which affects the average consumer and certainly American families.
Yesterday, I spoke with one of your Republican colleagues, Ukrainian-born Congresswoman Victoria Spartz from Indiana. Take a listen to part of what she had to say to me.
We also gave it almost $7 billion of humanitarian aid, and we need to have some oversight what's happening with that and where really it's going, because it's not on the ground. I saw it with my own eyes, and I hear from people over there. And we just had parliamentarians from Ukraine coming yesterday, and they saw they told us no presence of major organization on the ground. So we need to look into that because it's not implemented properly, and people are suffering. A lot of people are dying and will continue dying.
So in that conversation, she's talking about U.S. providing supplies to Ukraine. And obviously the logistics are difficult. But what exactly is the disconnect here? Because the Biden administration is promising, Congress is passing into law hundreds of millions of dollars of support for Ukraine. Why aren't they getting what they need as quickly as they need it?
Well, Jake, just yesterday, the White House gave a classified briefing to members of Congress. And just as you heard from Victoria, it truly is amazing the connection that Ukrainian members of parliament have with members of Congress. We're getting direct information. Many of the presenters yesterday in the classified briefing heard directly from lawmakers who are hearing from parliamentarians on the ground in Ukraine of the lack of supplies, both humanitarian and lethal aid that's getting through. But you have to understand, Jake, obviously there's a war going on in Ukraine. That makes logistics incredibly difficult. There were tremendous calls for the president to send in weapons and arms before this conflict began. So he's playing catch up in logistics now that are very, very difficult as you look to an actual conflict that's happening on the ground.
The head of the British intelligence agency says some Russian soldiers are becoming demoralized. Take a listen.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft.
What do you make of this assessment from the British, and how widespread is this, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's incredibly widespread. I think the Ukrainians themselves are doing more damage to the Russian military than the Russian military is doing to itself. But what we do see is difficulty that the Russians are also having with logistics. They didn't plan for this war to continue. They didn't plan for the level of resistance that you have from the Ukrainians. And so what you have is the Russians trying to provide supplies to their own troops that are having very difficult times in getting it there.
It does sound something like a mixed message that we're getting from the West on the state of the Russian military. On the one hand, NATO officials are saying Russian troops are bulking up, preparing for more attacks. On the other hand, we're also hearing that the Russian military is more fragile than expected, starting to defy orders. It might be difficult for Americans to understand where the status right now of what's going on with the Russian military.
Well, I can tell you the impression yesterday from the classified briefing that we got is that the administration understands that this conflict is going to go on for some time. And because of that, we're going to continue to try to get weapons in the hands of the Ukrainians. But the Russians did not plan or did expect this conflict to go this long. They thought that they were going to be received warmly. Obviously, they're not. They're being received by a very aggressive and very effective Ukrainian military armed with American weapons.
All right, Congressman Mike Turner, ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee. Thank you so much for your time, as always, sir. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, they escaped war, then stayed close to help the foreigners who do not call Ukraine home, yet feel compelled to help Ukrainian refugees. Plus, another concern for the West now in North Korea, the underground activity that has U.S. intelligence on alert. Stay with us.
We started with a laser focus and a mission of inspiring the world to start selling and using technology to solve problems for people, right? So I think we were very singularly focused on solving this problem of people having too many things that's unused and underutilized in their lives, but they're not selling them, and it all ended up in the landfills, and we wanted to make it really simple for them. So we created this solution where we made selling snapless sell simple, snapless sell in 30 seconds. We made buying very simple as chatting. And that mobile-first solution really caught on with our audience. We were starting this 9.5 years ago. It was really pioneering in the whole online marketplace and classifieds world. But we think we got to constantly stay heads down focused on serving our users. As a technology and a product-centric company, we can't rest on our laurels, and we got to keep innovating.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here?
How concerned are you about the front line?
You don't believe that there's a racial divide here?
Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think? All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
Ginger is often used to dress up a dish or add spice to a meal, but a growing body of research shows that this root can have big benefits for overall health. Studies suggest that ginger can help calm an upset stomach, often caused by nausea related to pregnancy or chemotherapy. One easy way to get ginger into your diet is with a breakfast smoothie. Blend 1 carrot, 3 apples, and a 1-inch piece of ginger root with a squeeze of lemon, then stir and sip. Another easy way to add ginger to your diet is to puree it into a ginger pumpkin soup or add it to your favorite meal as a sauce. Another plus, ginger can help you unwind. According to a University of Georgia study, when ginger is consumed, either raw or heated, it helps ease muscle pain after working out by as much as 25%.
Continuing with our world lead now, among the now more than 4 million refugees from the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine are some people who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Students from other countries, for example, whose presence in Ukraine have nothing to do with Vladimir Putin's dreams of restoring the former Soviet empire. They had to flee, but not all of them went to their home country. CNN's Matt Rivers, who's in Hungary along the Ukrainian border, met with some who are helping other refugees because, as one said, it feels like they are a part of my family.
In the play area of a temporary refugee shelter in Zahun, Hungary, kids sketch out their recent traumas on paper. Burning tanks drawn in crayon. Deadly battles fill out the chalkboard. Just outside that tent, Anmal Gupta can't erase their pain, but he can get one of those kids a stuffed animal and a smile in the process.
When someone says, "I'm scared," what do you say to them?
Then we tell them what's going to happen next and everything will be okay, so you don't have to worry.
Cool.
And then I start joking with them, so a little bit there.
You're good at that.
Yes, yes, that I know.
A smile, he says, goes a long way. Anmal is a volunteer, having spent the last month just across the Ukraine border, helping weary Ukrainians navigate the first few steps of new lives as refugees in Hungary. The native of northern India is fluent in Russian, a skill honed over his years studying for a medical degree in the city of Kharkiv, Ukraine. He was living there when the bombs first started falling. His apartment was destroyed, his motorcycle hit by bullets and shrapnel, and his nights spent in bomb shelters. He fled to Hungary, but still, he wanted to help. As a foreigner, he says, he lost very little, while his friends, Ukrainians, have lost everything.
Is that part of the motivation that you have for being here?
Yes, it can be, because I have been with them for 9 years, and it feels like they are also my family.
And he's not the only foreigner once living in Ukraine that still wants to help. Behind Kiosk Restaurant's fancy dining room in Budapest works a man who just 2 weeks ago was fleeing from explosions. Even Ezrado works in the kitchen, but in early March, he was in Kharkiv. He fled when the Russians attacked.
So,
were you scared?
Yeah, I was so scared, because all the bombing stuff, see, it's also shaking our building.
He was studying there for a degree in business administration and wants to go back. But for now, he and his colleagues spend a part of their day cooking free meals for refugees.
At least I'm helping so that they are going to give some people food, some people that doesn't have anything to eat.
Back at the border, hundreds of refugees are headed in Budapest's direction. Anmol picks up some tickets, hands them out, then picks up some bags, and walks people to the train. He has done this every single day for a month now. So from us, a question.
How long do you think you're going to stay here?
As long as needed.
As long as needed. And when will that be?
No idea. That's the thing. I have no idea. But I believe that there will be some point when people will stop coming.
But that time hasn't yet come, and so he keeps helping amidst a crowd of people who need it. It's right where he wants to be.
You know, Jake, I asked Anmol how his family feels about the fact that he's still here and not back in India, and he said that first they weren't thrilled, but now they're proud of him. And, you know, frankly, in my opinion, they should be, because we've seen a lot of traumatized people come across that border in the last few days, and his ability, at least temporarily, to put a smile on some people's faces just because he's an upbeat, you know, that kind of guy, it's really valuable in times like these.
All right, Matt Rivers, thank you so much for that report. We're learning about an expanded investigation into the January 6th insurrection, the new questions about that rally before rioters stormed the Capitol, plus the new subpoenas recently issued. That's next.
Zenith El Primero. Now, this is a watch with a story. It was launched in 1969, and the name El Primero means the first in Spanish, because it was among the first automatic chronographs. But a few years later, the brand is bought by Zenith Radio Corporation. Zenith, the American corporation, ordered Zenith, the Swiss watch brand, to stop producing mechanical watches. And so the El Primero disappeared. But one crafty employee named Charles Vermeau hid the tools and all of the plans and designs. So when the ownership changed again in the 1970s, everything they needed to create the El Primero all over again was there. And in 1984, the El Primero roared back onto the stage, and again to the delight of the watch world.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
I am Nigerian by blood, British by birth, and American
by residents. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Hala Garani tonight.
I'm Phil Black in Lviv, Western Ukraine, and this is CNN.
There is a flurry of activity in the January 6 investigations, including the House Select Committee talking with Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Right now, let's get right to CNN's Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. And Ryan, you just got an update about Kushner's testimony. Tell us.
Yeah, that's right, Jake. Jared Kushner, of course, the son-in-law of the former President Donald Trump, still interviewing with the January 6th Select Committee, meaning this has been a lengthy deposition about what he knows about the events leading up to January 6th. Kushner began this virtual chat with the committee this morning. And it seems that the committee is very interested in what Kushner may know about the events leading up to January 6th. You'll remember that he was out of the country at that time, was actually flying back from overseas, so was not a part of the conversations that happened in the White House or in the Oval Office on that day. But it also shows that the committee has an interest that goes much beyond just the day itself, the events leading up to it, the attempts to overturn the election, and the different conspiracies connected to that. So that could be some of the questions that the committee is asking Kushner today. And it's also worth pointing out that the committee is also very interested in speaking to his wife, Ivanka Trump. They asked her to voluntarily appear before the committee. They're still negotiating with her in terms of her appearance. But it seems, at least today, they're getting a lot of information out of Jared Kushner, given the lengthy amount of time he has been in front of the committee, Jake.
And Ryan, we're also significantly learning that the federal criminal investigation into the January 6th insurrection is expanding. Tell us more.
Yeah, and it's a significant expansion, Jake. Up until this point, Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice have really trained their focus on the actual people that stormed the Capitol on that day and were causing all the violence. And that has led to some criticism in some circles, saying that they're not the only ones responsible for what happened here on January 6th. But we've been learning through a number of subpoenas that have been issued, some of the questions that have been asked, that probe appears to be expanding beyond just those individuals and the individuals that organized these rallies, that helped to fund these rallies, that brought everyone to the Capitol that day, and also kind of fomented the anger that led to the insurrection on that day. At this point, at least from what we've learned, it appears that these subpoenas seem to be more of a fact-finding mission. These aren't necessarily targets of the Justice Department, or there's no specific indication that indictments are forthcoming. But Merrick Garland said from the beginning that he would go as far as this investigation would lead them. This is the first sign that we've seen that they are taking it to the next step. And he has said in the past that they will continue to do so until the investigation concludes. Jake.
Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you so much. Coming up next, a closer look at the record amount of oil that President Biden wants released from U.S. reserves. Can 1 million barrels a day for 3 months really ease the price we pay at the pump? We'll gauge the possibility. That's next.
My name is Thierry Driessens. I'm Digital Transformation Officer for DHL Supply Chain. Today, if you look at what's happening these days, we go from crisis to crisis. That's going to be a fact, but the question is how do we react to that? How do we resolve the issues that arise from whatever is going to happen? So we had lots of disruptions, of course, and some of our customers came to a standstill, like the automotive industry. Some others boomed. E-commerce was booming, pharma was booming. We had peaks of operations that we'd never seen before, so we have to be ready. I believe a lot in digital representation of your physical reality, and that will allow us, for example, to do simulations on what's happening in real time in the supply chain, but also do some scenarios on what could happen. One thing is for sure, the future of supply chain is going to be more digital tomorrow than it is today.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
This is the result of one single blast.
3.3 million Ukrainians have now fled this country.
You don't have to go far to find a family who has been displaced.
We just heard an air raid siren ring out.
We run down to cover. It is hard to imagine life returning here.
In Kiev, Dnipro.
Poland.
This is CNN.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
In our money lead now, that unprecedented announcement to help ease gas prices. President Biden says 1 million barrels of oil will be released from the U.S. oil reserves every day for the next 6 months. That would help fuel the U.S. oil supply into September, but will that put a dent in the near record high prices we're paying now? $4.22 a gallon, according to AAA's national average today. Let's bring in CNN's Richard Quest. Richard, Biden did try something like this before. Back in November, he had 50 million barrels of oil released, 30 million earlier this month. Now it's 1 million barrels a day for 6 months. Comes out to roughly 180 million barrels. People are now back to work in the U.S. They're traveling for spring break. The busy summer travel season's coming up. 1 million barrels a day sounds good, but can it really help?
Well, amongst the 22 million a day that's consumed, it sort of puts it into perspective. Yes, it takes the pressure off, Jake. It's not going to dramatically reduce the price by 15, 20%. You're not going to see that sort of movement over the medium term, but you might see 5 or 10 cents. And more importantly, it is an extremely significant symbol that the government, the US government, is prepared to take action and keep the lid on the price as best it can. So both symbolism and practicalities, yes, releasing this vast amount by a presidential emergency decree, which is only the fourth time that it's been done, 3 previous occasions, is important. But the president was right. This is a bridge. It is not an answer in its own right. So anybody expecting to see dramatic falls will be disappointed. And bear in mind, you could actually see the price go back up again as the news changes and the situation gets worse with oil and gas because of Putin.
And Richard, OPEC today said that they're not coming to the rescue. They kept their modest production schedule as it is. Can Biden's announcement today put pressure on big oil companies to step up and produce more?
Yes. Oh, look, the message is clear from the US and others to the Saudis, to the Qataris, to all the major oil-producing companies. You have to do more. But they keep saying, because they have this weird construct of OPEC plus 2, which includes Russia, they say, no, hang on, the price is fundamentally in balance because of supply and demand. It's this geopolitical war business that's raised it above that. It's a nonsense. The reality is the price is the price. And the US has been putting... look, only last week I was in the region. I was in Dubai, hearing from various people the pressure that's being put on to squeeze the UAE and the Saudis to do more. So far they haven't. But here in Europe, Jake, there's also problems. Today, President Putin threatened to turn off the gas taps to Europe if they don't pay in rubles. Now, the Europeans say, we ain't doing that, because if we do that, we're breaking our own sanctions. So all in all, oil is the fighting ground because it's the political pressure, it heats the homes, it drives the cars, it flies the planes. And Putin knows he's got us where he wants us at the moment.
And Richard, on top of all this, a new report from the Department of Commerce here in the U.S. shows that inflation in the U.S. hit a 40-year high in February, the singest. And that we should note, that is the single biggest issue for 55% of Americans, according to a brand new Kaiser poll. That's almost 40 points ahead of feelings about Russia's invasion or climate change, COVID, crime. So obviously this is one of the reasons why Biden's approval ratings are so low. Are there signs of anybody in the United States changing their spending behaviors because of this inflation?
Yes, yes, and yes. You're starting to see people pulling back. You're starting to see prices. You're basically got these incredible forces in the economy at the moment. You've got the Fed starting to raise interest rates that will go much higher. You've got the government, the administration, clearly worried about inflation and having to put pressure through things like the SPR. You've got consumers not so much worried about jobs anymore, but they are worried about spending power. How high can it go? What purchases should I either make now or put off to the future? And you've got the prospect of stagflation. It's highly unlikely to have a recession, the United States, but this idea of weak, anemic growth at a time of inflation. These are the forces at a time when the US is facing basically an economic war with Russia while supporting Ukraine in a real war, and Europe is facing even worse problems as it has to deal with the refugee crisis. Let's make no bones about this, Jake. The situation economically is poor, getting worse, with the prospect of a recession in parts of the world.
All right, Richard Quest with that sobering news. Thank you so much. In our Health Lead today, a COVID outbreak has brought one of the busiest, most populated cities in the world to a grinding halt. Today, Shanghai is under a full city lockdown. The government there also apologizing for having been caught off guard after a surge in new cases set off panic. And now the city of 25 million looks like a ghost town. People forced to stay at home. CNN's Will Ripley's in the region in Taiwan. And Will, the Shanghai government's admitting they were not fully prepared. Did they say how long this citywide lockdown might last?
It's going to be at least a matter of days, Jake. And you're talking about, you mentioned 25 million people, more than the population of this island of Taiwan, where I am, which also has a zero COVID policy, by the way, and an uptick in cases because Omicron is highly contagious and it's very difficult to keep COVID out forever. But in Shanghai, 5,600 cases, daily cases now, are causing this lockdown, are shutting down a city, a vital cargo and transportation hub, hurting the economy, not just in Shanghai and in China, but perhaps even globally. And you have people with medical conditions like asthma, not being able to get to the hospital on time. In fact, there was a video shared on social media, an asthma patient refused by an ambulance. That patient later died. So the hysteria about COVID, most other countries, the United States, have far bigger case numbers, but life when you're there feels relatively normal. But certain countries and territories here in Asia, including Hong Kong, which is dealing with its largest ever outbreak and a massive surge in cases, and no herd immunity, by the way, because they kept COVID out and a lot of people felt they didn't need to get vaccinated. So when Omicron came in, the cases spread like wildfire, Jake.
And what might this situation reveal about China's zero COVID strategy?
Well, it's interesting because the Chinese President Xi Jinping is kind of trying to walk the line to save face, saying, you know, the country has to be committed to zero COVID, but minimize the impact on the economy and on society. But you can't minimize the impact when a small number of cases leads to a massive lockdown, even though they won't call it a lockdown because they're sending localized notices and locking down portions of the city at once. Life is disrupted. It's disrupted in Hong Kong as well for case numbers that would be considered small in most places that have accepted COVID and encourage people to get vaccinated so that they can live their lives and not have to feel, you know, this hysteria and fear that grips a lot of these places with zero COVID, where people are just afraid of the unknown. Countries that have already allowed it in might say that, you know, life continues on for most people, Jake.
All right, well, Ripley, thank you so much. Also in that region today, new intelligence on North Korea, the activity happening underground that has the U.S. and allies watching closely with concern. Stay with us.
Through investment in STEM schools, Egypt has committed to building a more diverse and inclusive workforce. They are encouraging women and girls across the country to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. By ensuring that they are not just represented, but are also empowered to thrive across all sectors, Egypt has demonstrated their commitment to investing in the country's youth and in the mission to achieve sustainable development goals.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks and sometimes go down a path that's not marked.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
These protests are a test for Hamas.
Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks and security forces firing tear gas.
When you dare to take risks, you witness passion and persistence.
And they just want to get their past be processed so they can get out of this facility.
And that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
The Dubai World Cup began in 1996. Back then, the Middle East was a small player on the global sporting stage. Fast forward to today, and it's expected to be the fastest growing region in the industry in the next 3 to 5 years.
I met up with the chairman of the Dubai Racing Authority, Sheikh Rashid bin Darmouk Al Maktoum, to talk about follies and more.
Eleni, welcome here to the Meydan Racecourse. You're actually walking on one of the best tracks in the world, which is the turf track. Horses that run on this safe ground are horses from all around the world. We believe this is a fair ground for all horses who like the soft ground or the fast ground.
We've all heard the saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, fruits of all varieties come with nutritional benefits. Apples are rich in antioxidants and fiber. If you're grabbing one as a snack, don't discard the skin because that contains much of the fiber. As for oranges, they offer more than just vitamin C. They're a good source of potassium and also fiber. And a glass of orange juice can quench your thirst. Just make sure yours has no added sugars. Bananas are a source of potassium and fiber too, and also vitamin B6. Grapes of all colors are chock full of antioxidants and other nutrients. And love your strawberry smoothies? Strawberries are a good source of vitamin C, potassium, and another essential nutrient called manganese. It's a little known mineral that your body needs to stay healthy.
Also in our world lead today, troubling new signs that North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un may have restarted his country's efforts to make a nuclear bomb. Let's go to CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr. Barbara, experts say they're seeing new activity at North Korea's nuclear testing site?
That's right, Jake. U.S. and intelligence services in the region are seeing indications. U.S. officials telling us they see indications of construction activity, digging at the underground test site in the northern part of the country, where in the past North Korea has conducted underground nuclear tests. Now, their last test was in 2017, and you'll remember the next year in 2018, they invited the world press to watch them blow up the site as part of President Trump's now failed denuclearization initiative. It was never clear if the site was totally blown up, totally destroyed, but now all the indications are they are back at it and they want to restart that site and move towards testing underground nuclear devices again. It will be a huge step forward in their weapons program if they go ahead and do it, Jake.
And Barbara, you're also hearing that North Korea may test another ballistic missile soon?
Yeah, there are also intelligence indications. These usually come, of course, from satellites overhead that see activity on the ground. That is very well known. Indications are North Korea is moving towards another missile test in the coming weeks. Now, we had one from them that was seen several days ago. It was the largest, most powerful to date, largest distance flown, most significant altitude, with a theoretical capability of striking the United States. So if they can put that kind of missile together with some kind of nuclear warhead, that is a red line for the world. They do not want North Korea to become a nuclear state. No indication that Kim Jong-un is the least bit interested in sitting down and talking about it all, Jake.
All right, Barbara Starr, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, some of the youngest victims.
Hello, I'm Bianca Noblo in London. We're now going to leave the lead with Jake Tapper and take a deeper look at today's international stories for our viewers worldwide. I'll be bringing you the global brief in just a few moments, but we'll continue CNN's coverage of Russia's war in Ukraine. As Ukrainian officials say that Russian troops are regrouping in Belarus to replenish after heavy losses in manpower and weapons. And NATO's Secretary General warns that Ukraine's suffering isn't over yet, as the Russian offensive will soon concentrate on the eastern part of the country.
According to our intelligence, Russian units are not withdrawing, but repositioning. Russia is trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region.
And in the debrief, while negotiating a ceasefire with Russia, Ukraine has offered to accept neutrality on the condition that Western countries would provide security guarantees. So we'll discuss what a neutral Ukraine might look like. Germany and France are refusing to pay for Russian gas supplies with rubles. This comes after Vladimir Putin announced that European countries who are, quote, unfriendly to Russia will need to pay in Russian currency. But the French and German finance ministers say that they're sticking to their contracts, which require payments in euros, even if that means that Russia cuts off gas deliveries. And then questions are being raised about North Korea's recent intercontinental ballistic missile launch. A South Korean military official tells CNN that last week's launch, hailed as North Korea's